TV.
Good evening and welcome on The Spot. My name is Patrick Kamara. And now, the indelible transparency of the Kenyan electoral process that produced William Ruto as the 5th president of Kenya was laudable and nearly incontrovertible. From opening up the results declaration portal for independent tallying to a largely peaceful ballot casting process, Kenya's electoral body, IEBC, seemed to have mended the dent the Supreme Court threw upon it in 2017. But are there lessons to learn for Uganda's own electoral commission that has 5 times been sued in Uganda's highest courts over its processes? What can the Uganda civil society do to enshrine democratic practices? Tonight, NTV on The Spot speaks Dr. Sarah Virete from the Center for Constitutional Governance was going to Supreme Court over presidential petitions, and Counsel Jude Byamukama, an electoral disputes lawyer who has been a part of presidential petitions. Dr. Sarah Virete and Counsel Jude Byamukama, I want to thank you so much for having honored our invitation. A warm welcome to both of you.
Thank you, and good evening, viewers.
Let me begin with you, Dr. Virete, because you were in Kenya as an elections observer. You spent some time there. In fact, you even met the AU leader of the observing group, the former president of Sierra Leone, President Koroma. What was your own impression that this election created?
You know, the electoral process was largely transparent. The campaigns were free, no disturbance by security officers. All candidates were free to interact with the citizens, sell their manifesto to the people, and on voting day, the people freely cast their vote, and they made the choice as to who should govern them. A credible, free and fair election has 5 characteristics. One is citizens' participation, free citizens' participation. The second characteristic is transparency. Transparency with stakeholders, including political actors, media, civil society, election observers, among others. The third characteristic is a verifiable result. And then you have freedom of expression by the actors, and then accountability. So when you score the Kenyan election based on the 5 key characteristics of a credible, free and fair election, largely the process at the time of voting was free, was verifiable. I personally moved to 6 polling stations on voting day, and each of these polling stations in primary schools had an average of 12, so they were polling centers, an average of 12 polling stations. So I moved to 6 primary schools within the wider Nairobi County.
So you're within Nairobi area?
Yes, I was in Nairobi area and in the National Tally Center. And the civil society had also the situation room that I was participating in. And I also wanted to see how the parallel voter tabulation would work out in Kenya's election, because this is the second time the civil society organizations in Kenya were running a parallel voter tabulation as a test, as a credibility test on the general result that would be issued by the IEBC. So I participated in Nairobi area for most of the time, and I also had engagements with other observers as well as the IEBC team on a number of issues. So when we met, interacted with the AU observer mission, that was the largest, with two former presidents, one for the voting period and another one for the immediate post-voting period for purposes of preventive diplomacy. So they had the former president of Sierra Leone and then the former president of Burundi for preventive diplomacy immediately after the announcement of results. We would share notes, first compare notes with how a credible election would work and whether we were on the same page as observers. Then look at the controversial or emerging issues to look out for. So in the election, it was largely agreed by most of the observers. I also met with the E-Observer Mission, which had 108 observers and had a big data center with both short-term and long-term observers from the EU member countries. So we agreed on 3 key emerging issues or contentious issues to look out for. One was the transmission and verification processes, which seemed to cause concern with all observer missions.
And why was it causing concern?
Yeah, the manner in which election results would be transmitted to the National Tally Center and the public verification exercises. So in previous engagements with civil society actors, the IEBC chair had indicated that indeed after the transmission of an image, then they would display that image on screens for everybody to see, and also have part of the screen as a tabulation for the totals of the results that would come in. And if you look at Article 39 of the IEBC Act, it provides that the Commission would provide provisional results. In this case, the Commission kept reading counter results. There was never a display of the tabulation as the results coming in. Yes. And so then that was a departure from the conversations that the civil society observers had had. Do
you think that was an intended departure or a technical challenge of the moment?
I am unable, as of today, as an observer, to explain what happened, because I think it would be not proper for me to
things I'm learning from,
as an observer.
The things I'm learning from your submission is that the process was good, the process was commendable, the process was laudable, you know, the infrastructure was in place.
Yes.
But let me also get the views of
If you can give me just 2 minutes.
2 minutes,
so
okay.
the second emerging issue was the 7 days, which is provided for by the Constitution, but which causes anxiety within the population. So we were discussing, is it possible to have the results maybe in 3 days? And the chair said he would try the best he could. And he thought...
But he had the latitude to use the 7 days,
course, the 7
because
is
it's provided for in the Act.
The 7 is the limit. Yeah, but there's nothing that stops you from announcing after 2 days. So we are looking at 2-3 days to make sure there is no anxiety, given the history of the post-election violence in Kenya. So, but that did not happen, so they took 6 days. And the third emerging issue was, from the observers, was the transition and the fear that each of the candidates would announce their own results and call the election, because everybody had their own tally center. So in the part of the diplomatic engagements, then we requested that the former heads of state, there were a total of 8 former heads of state in Nairobi.
Were in the as
part of the observer teams, yeah, and there were 77 observer missions accredited by the IEBC to observe the Kenya elections.
So there are tens of thousands of observers in Nairobi, yes, all over Kenya.
Yes, bringing a total of 18,000 observers for the election.
Councillor Jude Byamukama, what was your own impression of the election process of Kenya? I just want to get your opinion. Then we can go probably to the nitty-gritty, if we can, what really happened.
Well, obviously, I think I was quite impressed until the last 3-4 days when it became evident that there was a problem. in terms of tabulation of results by the IEBC. And then when the 4 commissioners, members of the IEBC, disowned the last segment of the process and indicated that they were not privy to the final announcement and the process that led to the declaration of a winner, obviously it leaves a sour taste, and it's a very sad ending to what looked to be a process that was free of the flaws that we have come to associate with the conduct of especially presidential elections at any level in most countries, here in Uganda and in most African countries really. So it's still difficult to see. I do not understand the thought process of the chairperson of the IEBC, and there are now accusations flying back and forth. He's accusing the commissioners that they were trying to blackmail him into flouting the law and declaring wrong results. The commissioners are saying the chairperson declared results that were opaque. It has become a popular word in Kenya at the moment. And the process that led to that final result was opaque. But
in other words, not clear.
Nothing is not clear.
Yes.
And
something hazy.
Yeah, so it's, I think it's unfortunate, but when we look at the process as a whole, and you know, when we talk about an election, it's a process, and we don't think about that short campaign period of around 2-3 months. It starts much earlier, and as far as I can see, the president-elect William Ruto started campaigning nearly 2-3 years ago, and it was clear that President Uhuru Kenyatta was not happy about it.
So let me ask this, Councillor Jude, because you are an office of court from the legal background. I presume you have read the Act of the IEBC. Perhaps you're also aware of the Kenyan Constitution. Did the chairman of the Electoral Commission flout any laws pertaining to that Act or even the Constitution of Kenya by going ahead announcing Ruto as the winner of this election, despite the fact that 4 of his commissioners disowned the results?
I think it's a very complicated question because of the way in which the Kenyan Constitution is designed. I'm very sure in case there is a legal dispute, it's going to rotate on how the Kenyan Supreme Court interprets Article 138 of the Kenyan Constitution. Article 138 of the Kenyan Constitution has 2 clauses that are relevant to our issue now. Article 138, Clause 3C, provides that the IEBC shall receive, verify and declare results. And then Clause 10 now specifically says the chairperson of the IEBC shall declare the winner and transmit the results to the Chief Justice and incumbent president. So there are 2 clauses which in my view are complementary.
Is it also true that the commissioners are supposed to sign on the results,
no,
so that to show that there's unanimity?
No, that's not provided for, not at least not within the law, from what I've seen thus far. The other issue is the IEBC. When the law provides that the IEBC shall do a task, now the IEBC is an institution, it's not an individual, and it's not the office of the chairperson. And what the Kenyan courts have interpreted that phrase to mean, which is also almost similar to what we have in Uganda, is that once that phrase is used, the IEBC is an institution composed of a chairperson and 6 commissioners, and they have a quorum of at least 3 of them. So once the law says the IEBC has to do a task, now it means that task has to be done by the team as a whole, and where they disagree, they have to take a vote. But now the Constitution gives a specific task to the chairperson of the IEBC at the point of declaration.
I see Mr. Chebukati is home and dry.
Yeah, so
what he did,
I think what the debate is going to be is the commissioners are going to argue that he usurped their power to verify results, and they did not participate in the process. Okay. Which could raise a bit of a difficult question.
Let me again come to you, Dr. Sarah Berete, because you are in Nairobi, you are at the IEBC center where the tabulation was going on. Do you get a sense that the Kenyan electoral process, you know, hoodwinked us to create a picture of this well-oiled machine, yet actually it wasn't?
No, I know there is no pure perfect election, but the Kenyan electoral process, save for the 3 days, in Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, was transparent. On Saturday, suspicious acts started featuring. One was blocking the observers accredited to be at the tally center from accessing the tally center, which I thought was really not in good faith. The second issue on Saturday...
If you can pause there, if you have 18,000 observers in your country, they are supposed to observe the process throughout the end. Even if you tell us it has been good from the beginning up to maybe 90% of the time, if the last 10% of the time you have made it hard for them, somehow I'm inclined to believe that really this was hoodwinking us.
Some people did not
you didn't mean well in the process.
Some people did not act in good faith. Yes.
You know, Patrick, I always have a bit of a quarrel with the election observers because they come at really the tail end of the process, those last 3-4 days, and for me, it's very difficult to form a judgment about an election that was a process in an entire country. Yes. Because you see complaints. I've had some complaints, even from the Azimio team, and they are complaining about what transpired in some up-country polling stations. Yes. And you know, typically observers in all the elections I've followed would be at the tally center and in the capital. And anyone who is running an election knows the last place where you think of doing irregularities is the capital. Irregularities in most elections...
of them are actually having a ball in Nairobi. Anyway.
Yeah. Irregularities typically take place in remote up-country and rural areas. So for you to have a fine feel of how an election has been conducted, you need to be in these areas, especially the strongholds of the two candidates, because the unique nature of Kenya is... in the Mount Kenya area, obviously, you are thinking about Ruto and his Kenya Kwanza team, and then the Luo Nyanza area, the same thing. Those are the areas which give you a feel of how an election has been conducted, where one candidate clearly has an absolute majority. Because elections usually go wrong in those areas. You'll find maybe if a candidate rightfully should be getting 900 votes, at the end of the day is getting 2,500 votes. So I think at the end of the day, we also need to... Sarah needs to tell us a little more about the judgment of the observers regarding
let me say this
process. Because the observers, in a submission even, Sarah, you're not very decisive. On one hand, these guys were very good, laudable. But on the other hand, which hand now should we believe?
No, Patrick.
That was right.
You are sounding like somebody. Now, so, but for the case of the Civil Society Election Observer Group, most of the groups were hosted by the Kenyan Election Observer Group known as ELOG Kenya, which is a coalition of all civic actors on governance in Kenya, including religious groups. So it hosted us. It hosted the East and the Horn of Africa Election Observer Network that I'm part of and I'm chairperson. It hosted the West African Election Observer Network. It hosted another Election Observer Network, Southern Election Observer Network from SADC countries.
Southern Africa.
Yes. So we had about 10,000 observers, a total of these groups, including the Kenyan observers, and they were spread all over the country. So it's not true that observers are concentrated in the capitals. Also, if you look at the way we ran the parallel voter tabulation, it had representatives from all parts of Kenya. As much as it is a scientific sampling method, but it had all counties of Kenya were represented in that sample of 1,000 polling stations.
So the issue we have here is the last 2 or the last 3 days of the tabulation.
Personally, I was in Kenya for close
to
2 weeks, so it's not just 2-3 days. I was in Kenya for almost 2 weeks.
That's okay, but what I'm saying, things started going south in the last 2 days or the last 3 days, right?
The last 3 days went south. So the first red flag was, and not everybody was accredited to be at the National Tally Center. For each group, there was an average of 15 tags for people to go to the National Tally Center. So it's not that every observer was going to then and would crowd the place. So for me, the red flags were two major on Saturday. So you stop observers accredited to be at the National Tally Center from accessing the Tally Center. That was really a first red flag that something is not right. The second red flag was the stopping one stakeholder when the principles of Azimio were blocked from, and they were accredited, from accessing the Tally Center. The civil society observers were later told after releasing a press statement, and that's the same day that media tallying, public tallying stopped. The media gave a different reason, but you see, if you want to use coincidence in politics, you stop media public tallying, you stop election observers, you block Azimio principles, including Professor Nyanginyong, including the chief campaign of Azimio. And so what was it?
Let me ask about the Kenya has a vibrant media, and they were giving us information because they're making their own tabulation and showing us the results. And all of a sudden, all of them stopped.
Yes.
Did they agree on themselves, or they were pushed?
I saw the editorial from the Nation Group, which was trying to be diplomatic. But I think the truth as to how all of them stopped will one day come out. Because to me, those were the three red flags that something was not right.
But okay.
And then on Monday, of course, they say, we are ready to announce. And everybody was waiting for that announcement.
So Councillor Jude, what do you make of the reality that happened in Kenya, that there are different, tally centers, everybody's tabulating results, and they're showing us, including the vibrant media in Kenya, because they were giving us conflicting figures. Of course, that was could be explained because of where they were picking the results from. But isn't there a problem in that you let media houses, first of all, they will have capacity issues of doing things right? This is not the ACOA job as compared to IEBC. Even though you want to be as democratic and open as possible, in there could be a problem.
I think this whole tallying mess comes from how it was conceived, first and foremost. The IEBC from the onset permitted media houses to access results from its portal and tabulate. Now, my own personal experience is it's very easy for people to assume that you can actually tally results of a presidential election. But the truth of the matter is you actually need a robust and well-resourced tally center to actually be able to do it. Because tallying results of over 50,000 polling stations, it's a very demanding discipline in itself. And when I tried it in Mama Mbabazi's presidential petition, we could barely get through one district, 10 of us in one day. It's a demanding exercise. First of all, you have got a declaration of results form, what those people are calling, I think, form 34A, for each polling station. You need to review it, and first of all, make sure the figures are making arithmetic sense. Make sure the signatures are all on, and then after that, pick those figures accurately and maybe upload them onto an Excel spreadsheet. For a particular polling station. One DR form alone will probably take around 10 minutes.
So now, in that kind of
doing that kind of thing, I think that exercise is very demanding. So once the IEBC permitted media houses to do it, I think there ought to have been guidelines on how it's done. And maybe for the public to know in advance. I think it was not proper to have one media house. I think Citizen TV was way ahead of all the other media houses and was tabulating up to almost 2 million. And then you have KTV is around 500,000 votes tallied. And that also causes apprehension among the viewers. And media houses also appeal to various segments of the population and maybe regions as well. So, which causes a problem. So my thinking is, tallying by the media in itself is not a bad thing. And I think it was a positive. But it needs to be done in a manner that is reasonably regulated to ensure that it does not create a false picture one in the mind of the public.
First of all, the media must have that capacity. You said you tried when you are 10 people, you are even failing to tabulate results of a district. And now we are talking about 20 million votes. And this is not your core job. I know maybe you are going to hire people, you know, who are skilled in that area. It's not your core job. Chances are that you will maybe make you meet some challenges. What do you think, Dr. Birete, we can be able to pick from the Kenyan example as Uganda now? Because
I agree with Council Jude's submission, and if the IEBC had done the display of the image and the tabulation, media would have picked that screen display from IEBC and transmitted it to the people.
Okay.
So that's where they lost that level of credibility on tabulation.
I can imagine now the Ugandan election handlers are like, you see what happened there? You guys want to have your own tabulation centers and tally centers? No way.
But you see, Patrick, our law actually requires that the Electoral Commission should have a tabulation which can be accessed by the media throughout. With a screen. It's actually in the law.
The same with
but
Kenya.
It's never done. And I think the bigger problem, in my view, again, I see the IEBC, and Kenyan law, again, in that regard, is quite similar to what we have here. What's the point of tabulating? Presidential election results, people vote at each polling station, and then at the level of a polling station, a winner is declared. Then the different results, what we call the declaration of results forms, DR forms, or Form 34A, are collected and availed to a returning officer in Uganda at the district. In Kenya, that's probably, I think, at the county level.
Yes.
Now, what Kenyan law requires is, for them at a constituency level, a returning officer is supposed to declare who has won in a particular constituency. And that result is supposed to be transmitted to the IEBC. And Kenyan courts ruled that that result, declared by a returning officer at a constituency level, cannot be altered by the IEBC.
Yes.
Okay.
So the job of the IEBC is simply to verify the results which are transmitted electronically with probably the hard copy that is brought manually by the returning officer.
All right, Council Jude Byamukama and Dr. Sarah Birete, hold on to your points because we're going to take a break on the spot. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're watching On the Spot. My name is Patrick Amara. My guests tonight are Dr. Sarah Birete from the Center for Constitutional Governance and Council Jude Byamukama. And we're trying to look through the Kenyan elections that happened last week, and the results were announced. Now, it is causing a controversy because 4 of the commissioners disagreed with the chairman of the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission of Kenya, and they think the results that were announced, now they are calling them the opaque. Let me look at the issue of the 7 days that were given in the Kenyan, in that act. Really, I want to commend the Kenyan people, the Kenyan population, for having the patience to wait for 7 days. I do not see it happen in Uganda. Here in Kampala, Ugandans waiting, watching on TV, and work is going on for 7 days. I don't think we have that patience. The Kenyans do.
Yeah, obviously it was it's something they might want to correct. It's in their constitution. Again, that Article 38, which talks about presidential elections, how they conduct them. Obviously, 7 days is too long. I don't think you need 7 days to tabulate results of around over 50,000, 70,000 polling stations. When you have got a tally center, you have got staff spread all over, you have got technology, and you are able to get hard copies of all these forms that you need from other polling stations, probably it shouldn't be going beyond 4 days. It's something they need to rethink. Because again, when there's so much time that is given to this final exercise of tallying, the more time you give, the more time for mischief.
Yes.
But also, for the Ugandan case of 48 hours, that also seems to be too short.
For sure. Again, 48 hours, I've always had the view that 48 hours, again, it also gives a temptation for mischief. Because if you are unable to comply and you are panicking, the clock is ticking, the temptation is to use provisional results and declare a winner, which we have seen the Electoral Commission doing. And that's why somebody was joking that the Ugandan way is we declare a winner, and then we begin the tallying process. So at the end of the day, I think
So
we have two extreme positions.
So in that case,
middle ground.
Yeah.
But Jude, what you have said is very serious. So perhaps we even know who is winning 2026.
Yeah,
Some people know the winner already. Okay. So let me ask you, Dr. Verete, you know, do you find the Kenyan population in this election to have moved away from the politics of identity to politics of issues?
Yes, there was a shift from ethnic politics, a big shift. Because if you look at the way the alliances were formed, which were cutting across different tribes, you have Raila teaming up with Karua from the Mount Kenya region, you have Kalenjin, Ruto teaming up also with somebody from Kalenjin, the Mount Kenya region, sorry. So I think that diffused the toxic ethnic politics. Although still the ethnic basis remained, but the toxic element was diffused. And to some extent, the election, although it was towards the end that there were clarity on issues.
I have a feeling that again we are hoodwinked for that to believe that Kenyans have moved away from the politics of identity to politics of ideas. Maybe at the top, they could have seemed maybe to have, you know, moved on. What explains the poor turnout? Because we realize that Kenya's largest ethnic group, the Gikuyu, did not have a candidate in this election. And this is when almost most of them did not turn up.
Yeah, I was coming to that, Patrick, if you may allow me some time. So the shift from issue-based politics was also not perfectly done. I think it's the beginning, because the issues were more clear towards the end of the campaigns. Youth registration to vote missed a target of 3.5 million. Electoral Commission had thought the new voters were a total of 4.5 million, but they only managed to register 1.031 new voters in the registration exercise. 3.5 million kept one, majority of them were young people. When it comes to the general turnout for people to vote, 8 million Kenyans kept away from the election.
So you, as the observers,
and
did you try to
had the lowest voter turnout?
Did you try to probe that?
Yes,
and find out why?
I'm coming. So our long-term observers, who are our hosts, the ELOG Observer Mission in Kenya, Election Observer Mission, did a survey on why there was low voter turnout in the registration. And the young people said they did not see the politicians communicating to their issues. Their major concerns were two: a high cost of living and unemployment. The third emerging issue was corruption. So at the beginning of the campaigns, these issues were not clear. The Kenya Kwanza team was talking of deep state. The Azimio team were talking of, so there was no clarity. There was no clarity of issues on unemployment, how jobs would be created, especially for young people, how to reduce the cost of living. I know Raila came out with a promise to distribute money per week, and everybody was like, where do you get this money? So those issues, the politicians did not communicate to the youth. So the survey, the quick exit survey on low turnout in Mount Kenya region, most of the respondents said they did not see anything to lose in the election. After all, both running mates were from the region. So whichever camp won, their issues would be taken care of, and they were not vying for the big seat. So
let me, what opinion do you get when you see what has already happened? Because if the results are declared, the commissioner is saying we don't believe in what the chairman is saying, and of course they're going to go to court. The country is divided right down the middle. Isn't Kenya really standing on the edge of, God forbid, falling into a bottomless pit of chaos?
I think there are 2 or 3 reasons why we should be more optimistic. First of all, it's very clear that Kenya has that historic decision when a presidential election, a result of a presidential election was annulled. In itself, that gives some sort of hope to people who are aggrieved, who think their candidate was cheated. And it serves some sort of therapeutic value when people know, well, my candidate was cheated, but maybe when he goes to court, we may have a rerun, we may have a second go at this. So one, that camp, and I see those are the messages from very many people, it calms them down. There's one in which it calms tensions when people think the court may be a fair arbiter of what has transpired. And then two, obviously, after the 2007 very sad election violence, we had the ICC come in.
The International Criminal Court.
Yes, and ulthough ultimately nobody was convicted, you know, of course, both Uhuru Kenyatta, the president, and the president-elect. Yeah, right now, actually, an associate of president-elect is still facing charges at the International Criminal Court for witness tampering. There's a sense in which that also acts as a check, especially on the principals who may incite their base.
So, Councillor Jude, you're telling us that because there was the International Criminal Court and that scale of 2007, and both President Uhuru Kenyatta and his deputy William Ruto were needed to go to The Hague, it acts like the proverbial sword of Damocles on their head for them to keep them in the check.
It's really a bit of a deterrent, definitely, because the ICC, very powerful nations, can disregard the ICC. They may not really care so much about it. Russia invades Ukraine and they are not going to be bothered by the ICC. But because of our own place in terms of global politics, sub-Saharan Africa, obviously if you are a leader within Kenya, you're going to be very careful. Because if the powers that be decide that maybe the ICC should be interested in what you have done in your country, it could present challenges. Okay.
Let me, Dr. Sarah Bidete, you are from the civil society. And when you look at what is happening on social media, in the candidature of Dr. William Ruto and his bromance with President Yoweri Museveni, it appears he was painted in Kenya as a man too close to General Museveni, the president of Uganda, and some of his detractors are not very happy about that. I wonder what you get on the ground.
I don't know whether that needed painting, because I think there was evidence of the two leaders working together on some issues. How the Kenyan people took that, I don't know whether it had a big influence in
let me ask you. Let me maybe ask you this way. President-elect William Ruto was seen in eastern Uganda during the presidential elections for Uganda with President Museveni on a campaign trail. He crossed the border because he can speak the language in the areas of Kapchorwa and try to dazzle the voters there. Do you think in some way President Museveni returned the favor?
No, but maybe if I recall,
good. So answering.
Actually,
one at a time, sir.
I know there were close associations. Even the colors the party colors that the different coalitions used, because you had Kenya Kwanza using yellow, then Azimio using blue and red. I even saw, so social media has its way of interpreting issues. But when you ask, we did not get a feel of Uganda's interference in Kenyan elections while in Kenya. I know I've seen one of the online websites reporting that Uganda is being accused. The time we spent in Kenya observing elections, the information we are getting from our long-term observers who are based in Kenya, we have not got information.
There was a time when Dr. William Ruto
but I know many Ugandans
from flying to Uganda from Wilson Airport because he was coming to have a meeting with the Ugandan leaders, and that caused the controversy in the Kenyan public.
But well, maybe just to clarify, actually in 2016, even Raila Odinga did go on the campaign trail with President Museveni. So it wasn't only William Ruto in a sense. That's one. Two, obviously, it does appear that there is better chemistry, I think, between our president and the president-elect in Kenya. And that is always going to have a bit of debate. Legally speaking, I think the president may have his choice. Maybe in the diplomatic terms may not be a good idea for it to be too obvious, but his lieutenants may say one or two things about it.
Let me put it this way. Maybe, do you find President Museveni a very lucky man? He seems to align with the people who eventually, who look like the underdogs, but eventually win. I'm talking about this because I saw what happened in the Democratic Republic of Congo when President Felix Tshisekedi was always coming to Entebbe to meet President Museveni for the meetings during the elections. The world knew that this election was for Fayulu to win. Actually, Tshisekedi was not even thinking he was going even to come second. And boom, it's him. When everybody thought the Kenyan incumbent president is supporting Raila, and maybe it is Raila, and all the opinion polls are showing an age that Raila is ahead, and Dr. Ruto is coming to have lunch with Museveni, and you know what? It is him.
So it's suggesting there is some magic.
No, I don't want
It could be that he plays a diplomatic long game way ahead of time. That's why he has been here for these years.
Some people are caught napping in this. But you know, by the way, sometimes to be a good general, you also need to be like a general. Anyway.
No, but if you look at Ruto's campaign, Ruto started way early as compared to Azimio Coalition in his campaigns. Actually, he had much higher ratings before than compared to the ratings he had towards the elections and the results he got. The ratings before, like 1 year ago, were much higher for Ruto. But he also coined a message that attracted youth support, the hustlers slogan. Although when you look at Ruto himself, somebody who has been a minister for over 2 decades, you wonder what kind of
vice president, deputy president for 10 years.
But you see, I think in the ultimate sense, when you look at the tallies, at least that are now official, the main difference between this election and 2017 is Raila's support at the coast declined, and Ruto made significant gains. Ruto and Kenyatta had around 300,000 at the coast. Ruto this time, I think, went almost over 500,000 votes. And Raila required to have at least 80% of the votes at the coast. If he had gotten that, the rest of the numbers were fairly in his favor.
Look at this. The incumbent president, who was opposed to his deputy in this election, I'm told he lost on his own polling station.
Yeah.
The running mate of Raila Odinga, Martha Karua, in her own, I suppose, maybe tribal enclave, lost at her own polling station. The next political dynasty of Kenya, that the man who was maybe presumed to be the next maybe 10-year president, Mr. Gideon Moi, lost the consensus of Baringo. I mean, Dr. Ruto really hammered these people.
You know, they are, as much as there was...
He exposed them.
There was targeted campaigning on the side of Ruto. He did a lot of digital campaigning. And we know that majority voters in Africa are young people, and they are always on the digital platforms. But away from that, there is a tribal underlying within those areas. Because the time I spent in Kenya, I got to learn that the Luo do not circumcise, and the rest of the Kenyan tribes, most of the areas, circumcise. And the people in Mount Kenya region believe that a person who is not circumcised is not brave to lead them.
He's not yet man. He's not man enough.
There's a strong tribal sentiment.
But this is why I'm telling you that I think this facade of Kenya has moved away from the politics of identity to ideas. Is just being.
No, we are talking about toxic identity politics.
Because they are there. That's what we're talking about. This actually emphasizes
the tribe underlying.
Yeah.
No, I think the voting patterns have not changed much.
Yeah.
Because you still have
still
Nyanza province for Raila, Mount Kenya, Ruto, and then the cost somehow always votes for Raila. Yeah, but typically, Raila used to perform extremely well at the coast, and Ruto made significant inroads into that, and that's why you have that narrow margin. By the way, they were less than 69,000 votes from a rerun. The margin is 200,000, but just 69,000 votes
is what saved Ruto to go for a rerun.
So it's the picture may not be entirely accurate in terms of how he has won, and well, of course, later when we look at the complaints of this particular campaign, teams will know what else could have gone wrong.
So you're saying if he had fallen short of 69,000 votes, Kenya would have gone for a rerun. Yes. But also what that tells us, that the country is divided right down the middle. And so the presidency of William Ruto is going to be a hard one, isn't it?
But, you know, you need to look at the elected leaders. I think Azimio has majority governors and a big number of MPs. But Kenya Kwanza has won the Senate, but with a 1-seat difference from Azimio. So that shows you that even regardless of who takes power, they have to discuss and agree with the other team.
But already some independents have aligned themselves.
The independents can swing here and there. But if you look at the result the way it is like a divided mandate.
So now, if we juxtapose Kenya and Uganda, when we go to election, before they announce the results, if you go in some towns, urban areas, you know, they turned into army garrisons with the battle wagons on the streets, big guns on the streets. You may think that the country is at war. Can we really copy the Kenyan example? And also another example whereby President Uhuru Kenyatta actually demystified, should I say, the presidency? He showed us that the presidency looked like any other job. That man somehow looked like the chairman of a certain corporation than a president. I mean, he was easy at it. Can't we just lower down the pressure and look at the presidency like any other job?
I think the biggest challenge we have in Uganda when it comes to presidential election contests, and increasingly even at a parliamentary level, for some candidates, it appears they are not running against fellow candidates from other political parties, but they are running against the state. So you have candidates who spend the bulk of their campaign, they're in confrontations with the police, with security organs. We have had all those situations. We have had candidates, 2006, we had the candidate spending a large part of his campaign undergoing a very phony criminal trial. We have candidates being arrested in the middle of campaigns for all sorts of minor infractions, but simply because they are more or less running against the state. The moment you have state operatives, people who are paid by the taxpayer, who have other jobs that are not running political campaigns, resident district commissioners, maybe staff in ISO, ordinary civil servants. The moment you have those people involved in a political campaign on one side, it simply means that the other candidates are running against the state. They are no longer running against another individual. Even if that individual is a member of the ruling party, that should not be a problem. A ruling party will always have certain inherent advantages, for sure. That cannot be debated. There is nothing wrong with the president going with his entourage to campaign for NRM flag bearers, for instance, or the vice president.
Because he doesn't see
or cabinet ministers, yes, for sure. But the moment you start involving civil servants,
I'm trying to show you on the screen the Ugandan situation when the army is out and people are being whipped on the streets.
So at the end of the day,
election.
Even the army, I think these people who are in the army, who are deployed, they are deployed literally to go and deal with the political opponents.
This is our kind of election in Uganda.
Yes,
and the Kenyans really showed us that that we are still
so at the end of the day, unless we have people having elections against other parties, not against the state.
So,
but what Council Judy is describing is state capture. We have deep-rooted state capture in this country. You have the national, or call it the Uganda People's Defense Forces, conducting themselves like the military wing of NRM as a party. So they are still like NRA, NRM. So you don't have a national force to talk about during elections. You have the soldiers engaged in campaigns. You have soldiers, and you had clips of the likes of Brigadier Sunday in Masaka, the command of mechanized brigade, issuing cantankerous statements, going in the field and even beating people. And nothing was done to him, and I think he was promoted. So you have this impunity, unchecked impunity in the country. You have, you know how many political prisoners were detained in Makinde? Arrested for supporting opposition. No other crime.
So let me ask, and somebody has sent me a question, by the way, Dr. Sarah. The Ugandan civil society has been lax about insisting on electoral reforms the way the Kenyan civil society has. Why does Ugandan civil society drop the ball?
You know, we need to come to an agreement that the job of building civic competence and the job of having Ugandans participate or enjoy their political rights as enshrined in Article 1 of the Constitution, where it is clearly stated that all power belongs to the people, is not the quest for just civil society. So people look at the quest for electoral reforms as a mandate of civil society. It must be a demand from the people. So that's why we are not, and there is no political will. Even where Supreme Court of Uganda clearly stated the reforms to be done, and they went ahead to even prescribe a time frame, say that for every parliament, electoral reforms should be done in the first 2 years. This parliament has finished 1 year. Do you see any talk of reforms? There is no political will in this country to conduct credible, free and fair elections. And we are experiencing deep-seated state capture where you don't have a difference between a ruling party and a state. And our elections are like a military operation.
So, Jude, we have had bitterly contested by-elections, including recently in Soroti and other places. Do you get a sense that this could actually be the dress rehearsal for 2026? Or even worse?
Clearly, there is, it's very difficult to be optimistic about whether the quality of our elections is going to change for the better. The pattern that has emerged in Soroti and even in Chisoro, by the way, where those had the by-election last week, and today in Kasese and Busongora South.
And Kayunga.
Yeah, it's clearly, instead of having by-elections to correct mistakes of the general election, the by-elections instead are creating more, you have more mistakes. Before I came here, I was having a quick discussion with a petition I represented, the Honorable Jackson Mbaju,
for Busongora?
For Busongora South. And I rang him just to find out, to get his feel, to find out whether he was winning the tally, and he told me he's seated at home, he's not interested. And
the participant in the election is not interested?
Yeah, because his view was, at some polling stations, there were over 16 soldiers deployed, so people even were scared of going to vote. And now when you have that kind of situation, obviously, it's very easy to predict.
But if soldiers are at the polling station and not bothering you, why should that be an issue? One,
the law actually prohibits deployment of soldiers at polling stations.
Why should they be
because of that psychological impact that one, because of our history and what we have come to know from
security agencies. I thought also the law says there should be a policeman, though unarmed.
There should be a policeman
at the polling station.
Actually,
and police constables.
Taking a firearm to a polling station is an electoral offense. And among the reasons why the election in Gogonyo County in Palisa was annulled was because the candidate who won went to polling stations with armed guards. But now courts of law annul an election for such an irregularity, and then instead we have...
You double it.
They double it down within the by-election. So it's somehow it becomes a fuss, and at some point we have to ask ourselves whether it's even worth it. Indeed, I asked this gentleman, so are you going to petition again? And he said, no, it's not. I don't see the point. That having been said, I think we don't have to be very pessimistic. We have to look at Kenya. Kenya has been running a multi-party democracy since around 1992. Uganda, we half-heartedly embraced multi-party democracy in 2005. So we have been at it for just 17 years. And so when we look at Kenya, we need to be mindful that the culture of belonging to a different political party does not mean this person is an enemy of the state. It's also a culture that's built. And if people lose hope, we will regress. When you look at individuals like Dr. Paul Kawanga Semogerere, he started instituting legal challenges against the then movement political system in the late 1990s and early 2000s. Until he forced the courts to finally make a declaration that the movement political system was an organization, and therefore it was infringing on the freedom of association by restricting the other political parties from only having offices at a national level and not at a regional and local level. So it takes effort of some people, and I think Dr. Paul Kawanga Semogerere and that first crop of individuals, they played their role. Yeah. For me, I recall in the early 90s, like in the CA elections, I think I was in primary 5, around 93, 94. Accusing somebody of being a multi-partist was considered very derogatory.
Treason.
Saying this person is a multi-partist, it was considered a derogatory term. I remember just following an election as a young boy of Honorable Ruhakana Rugunda and the late Robert Chitaliko in Kabale municipality. And we are being told, you know, you can't vote for Robert Chitaliko. He's a multi-partist. He belongs to DP.
But do you know, towards the end of the removal of the when they are bringing back multi-party democracy, yes, again the NRM was in the forefront of campaigning for the same. Yeah, because you see the NRM kind of, the message then was, these people who are complaining of being in NRM, let's get rid of them. To be Jeko, you are leaving. Let them get out of NRM. And so we still have in the hearts and minds of very many people, it's still considered an anomaly, an oddity for someone not to be in NRM. Okay. And that's the impression you'll get, and I think partly it informs how our elections get conducted and how people who are not necessarily campaigning as NRM flag bearers are treated by even the state agencies. Jude and Dr. Sarah, we're going to take a break. When we come back, I'll open the line so that you too can be a part of this discussion. You're going to see the numbers on the screen. Pick your phone, call us, and tell us what you think. And should you disagree with me or with the panelists, that's okay. But we ask you to disagree with respect. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're watching On the Spot. My name is Patrick Amara. My guest tonight are Dr. Sarah Vireti from the Center for Constitutional Governance and Council Jude Byamukama, and we're looking into the election challenges in Kenya and how that can maybe impact on the Ugandan situation. I have a question here. Maybe, Jude, you could go for it. From the Supreme Court's decision in 2016, did the EC make the kind of changes that can guarantee a free and fair election? Well, maybe just to recap, in 2016, the Supreme Court made directives that the Attorney General needed to implement certain electoral reforms. There were around 5 broad areas. The most important would be to provide for the use of technology in elections, to have a law that specifically clarifies how technology is used in elections, to provide clear laws that prohibit public servants from participating in partisan campaigns, to provide for more time for filing of presidential election petitions so that candidates would maybe have enough time, those who are aggrieved, to collect evidence. What eventually happened, unfortunately, is that Parliament passed very, very token reforms. Okay, just hold there. I just want to inform our viewers tonight that you can be able to send us your questions or your comments. We have a WhatsApp number on the screen. We have this WhatsApp number. You'll be able to send comments or questions. Please keep it civil. Ask whatever question you have, and in any case, you can always disagree so long as you disagree with respect. So the number is there. If you send your questions or your comments, I'll be able to read so that Dr. Bireche and Councillor Jude Byamukama can be able to respond to you.
So what eventually happened is Parliament passed very token reforms after there was a bit of pressure, but from some members of civil society who applied. They were led by Professor Edward Frederick Sempebwa. They applied to the Supreme Court to have the Attorney General, then the Honorable William Byaruhanga, declared to be in contempt of the court's decision for failing to pass the reforms. And the Supreme Court, at the time, when that application was filed, before it could be heard, that's when bills were quickly prepared. Very brief bills were prepared, amending the Parliamentary Elections Act, and then an adjustment to the Electoral Commission Act. In my view, they appear to have been prepared just to help the Attorney General have evidence to give to the Supreme Court that they were in progress. So the Attorney General filed a response in the Supreme Court explaining that he had had very short time to do enough consultations to make these electoral reforms, but he was in progress. and the Supreme Court agreed and said he wasn't in contempt. Subsequently, very minor amendments were made to the Electoral Commission Act, to the Parliamentary Elections Act, mainly to provide for a criminal offence of public servants who participate in partisan campaigns. Then regulations were made governing the use of technology, but they were made in a way that didn't change anything. They don't provide for how results are tallied or transmitted electronically. They do not provide any clear checks that we see, for example, within the regulations that govern tallying in Kenya. And that's what we have. In other words, there was just a half-spirited attempt at implementing these electoral reforms. But at the end of the day, it was very apparent that these reforms are not popular with the ruling party.
But are these recommendations given by the Supreme Court, are they, as a must, you have to, do you have to, can they be disregarded or not? Because I think they even gave a time frame of around 2 years.
Yes, they gave a time frame.
And I remember that we almost went beyond 2 years.
No, we did go beyond 2 years.
Are they mandatory?
The Supreme Court clarified that it expected they were directives and not recommendations.
Okay.
And they didn't give, you see, they were not cast in stone. You have to remember that the courts of law, the judiciary is an arm of government, the executive is another arm, and Parliament is a separate arm. So the judiciary cannot entirely force the executive and Parliament to work in a particular way.
How does it become a directive then?
All that the court did was, was give a directive that Parliament needs to do its job of passing a law to provide for this, because it's their mandate. And what Parliament did with the executive prepared bills, which was simply very cosmetic in character.
Okay, Dr. Sarah,
and presented them to Parliament.
For a long time, both of you, the members of the opposition were calling for electoral reforms, and I remember others calling for the dialogue, for the dialogue, so that we can have a national dialogue. Now we have a man who has taken a lot of his time calling for reforms. He's now the Minister of Justice and Constitutional Affairs, the Honorable Norbert Mao. Maybe this is it now.
I wanted, before I come to Honorable Norbert Mao, I wanted to comment on two issues. One is the broad, free and fair campaign that civil society organizations ran before the 2016 elections. And they consulted countrywide together with the political parties and came up with a pact on free and fair elections in Uganda. That pact is gathering dust. Every term of office, and I know somebody asked and said, civil society, why have you dropped the ball? We are already consulting on putting forward the campaign for credible electoral reforms.
Yes.
So, but it is important for the viewers to note that towards every election, government runs piecemeal cosmetic reforms that do not have a substantial effect on the nature and credibility of elections.
Yeah, but you see,
running this country.
Civil society, I think I want to agree with the gentleman, the individual who sent the message, that maybe we also need to be a little more demanding about from our civil society. Because you see, elections, we shall have an election maybe in 2026. At the time when civil society should be doing its role of encouraging government to implement reforms is now. Not to wait for 6 months before a general election, and then they begin to make the right noises when it's too late. Civil society at an ideological level is supposed to be a group of individuals outside state structures who are organized to influence the state. And now, if people in civil society do not align their priorities with influencing the state in time, and they only remember to do so when it's too late, we'll continue lamenting. I think, for instance, I do not know why members of the opposition in parliament do not initiate private members' bills and let them be defeated because the ruling party has refused to approve them.
So the game changer for our country is for us to be able to have a vibrant citizenry, people who know their rights and their responsibilities, civic competence that is up there. But Dr. Bidete, what will it take so that the job for politicians and civil society is made easier if the Ugandan people, just pretty much maybe like the Kenyans, are up there, they know their rights and they know their responsibilities and they are engaging? Because when you reach that level, then you cannot be taken for granted.
You know, when you look at the Kenyan civic competencies that are generally high and with the ability to protect and safeguard their constitutional democracy, regardless of the challenges that they face, it has been built over time. But also since the enactment of the new constitution in 2010, there has been a deliberate effort to expand civic space in Kenya. So even when you build on the constitution, that really has credible legroom for civic actors and political actors in the country to push for improved democratic processes, the 2017 Supreme Court, in a very decisive manner, also contributed to expanding that space. So if we could have the boldness of the judiciary, if we could have functional institutions, if we could have independence of these institutions, because you cannot expect civil society alone in Uganda, which is facing challenges of state capture. Clamp down on civil society, it goes on a daily basis. So as civil society actors, and for the information of the viewers and the person who asked the question, we have launched electoral reforms. I know the team that is going to meet the Honorable Minister of Justice and Constitutional Affairs in a few days. So we have launched the campaign, and we are not waiting for the elections. But to what extent? You are looking at...
Do you really think that you still have an ally in the name of the Honorable Norbert Mao?
No, Honorable Norbert Mao had made his own pledge, put in the MOU, put in his key issues that he has pledged to address. So history will judge him. He has made the pledge on his own. I don't think anybody, at least civil society organizations, nobody went to lobby him to make that pledge. So he claims he has agreed with the person he entered into an MOU with that these are the issues they will pursue. So let's see if they will pursue them or not. But as for the work of civil society, we shall not tire in advocating for the objectives that we set ourselves to do, as provided for in the Constitution. But it is not just a job that should be left to only civil society or NGOs. There is the broader civil society beyond NGOs, which includes the corporate, you know, the elite.
No, civil society includes really any organized people outside the state structures.
Yes, the
NGOs.
It's not just NGOs, the academia.
Even institutions of
yes, and if you look at the comparison with Kenya, We were observing elections with the national institutions in Kenya. The office of the DPP was observing elections. The office of the Inspector General of Government was observing elections. The Human Rights Commission, the national institution, was observing elections with us. And they said they must participate to ensure that the irregularities and mistakes are minimized at that or whatever. But when you come back to our, I know a few of the likes of Council Jude and a few others really engage and give time back to communities. But most of our areas are too much money-minded. And when a conflict happens, they are waiting for who can hire them. I know everybody needs money, but they are just waiting on which side can hire them, where can they cash in on a conflict, and they do not come out the way you see the Law Society of Kenya engaging, even with the controversy at IBC. The Law Society of Kenya is engaging head-on. But where is the Law Society of Uganda?
But maybe I think something important that I see about our civil society players, I do not know whether they have adopted the best strategies to be able to influence the government of the day. Sometimes it's a bit of a mistake if civil society players position themselves as if they are hostile to the ruling party. I think, in my view,
as you continue making that, you contribute, I just want to let people know that you can send your comments or your questions on the number, the WhatsApp number that you have on the screen. I'll be able to read them so that my panelists can be able to respond to you or want to hear your views. So please let those comments come in, because shortly I'll be reading them. Yes, continue.
In my view, civil society need not, in all cases, have an adversarial relationship, either with the ruling party or with parliament. Certain changes could be made without having to have these confrontations, maybe have press statements. I've seen many civil society sponsored legislations going through parliament, whether the Anti-Torture Act, the Human Rights Enforcement Act 2019. Civil society has the capacity, when they choose to have the discipline, to proactively engage. And I think even this question of electoral reforms, civil society players need to avoid taking the approach of being confused to be just another opposition player against the ruling party. Once that happens, you are not going to get buy-in from NRM, and it has 85% of the members of parliament. If they perceive the Citizens Compact, which I think was what was its main problem, as a product of the opposition and civil society who want a law to be enacted for purposes of removing NRM from power, it's not going to work.
But Council Jude, if I may come in, I think most, especially given the turnover of members of parliament, which is above 60%, most of the members of parliament are also victims of a badly regulated campaign environment, including electoral violence, including excessive use of money. We have been pushing for regulation on campaign financing. Our alliance through the campaign finance monitoring platform has the private members been drafted.
Okay, Dr. Sarah Bireti and Councillor Jude, I've requested the viewers to send in their comments and questions, so I want you to send them, and so that they can be able to read them for you and Dr. Sarah and Councillor Jude, so that you can maybe give answers some of these. So let us have those questions. I have somebody saying, I appreciate the efforts of our guests towards awakening Ugandans. I kindly request them never to be bought by Museveni. That issue of being bought, do you have a price on you, Dr. Bireti? Let me also, somebody says, hello, good evening, Mr. Kamara. By the way, Kamara with an R, not L-A. Kamara, not Kamala. All right. Hello, good evening, Mr. Kamara, and the panelists. Witness to message, I can say that in Uganda we will have peace when and after the powers that the President's office are trimmed and shared amongst the other institutions to help in making appropriate decisions. We seem to have an imperial presidency. What do you make of that? And somebody says, I think observers have let us on several occasions during elections. A case in point 2021 general elections, where they came out and said that it was a free and fair election in spite of all the illegal acts that transpired. And that's about you. Maybe let me pick a little more. Thank you so much, Mr. Kamara, for that wonderful program, educative and informative, live from Kibale, Nabingola Bobede, Evangelist Mugiso Richard Kajeve. Okay, by the way, Mugiso Richard Kajeve went to school together. My big disagreement here is the issue of Kenya, democracy, and Uganda. In Kenya, it's the members of parliament who vets the Chief Justice, but here it's the President who has the right to appoint anything, IGP, Chief Justice, and the Chairman Electoral Commission, who shows what it's not at their will to be independent, but commanded by their master, whom they serve. Those are the views from Ugandans. And until Museveni is out of the equation, Uganda cannot have a peaceful election. He has deliberately weakened institutions and fused the army and the ruling party so much that the former are openly on the side of whoever stands for the yellow bus. And that's a gentleman called Francis. Today, my WhatsApp number is flowing with the comments. Mr. Kamara, my question goes out to Councillor Jude. Does the position of the 4 IEBC commissioners leave the victory of the president-elect in balance, regards Evans Emoiti? So those are some, I think I'm going to have to read maybe 2 or 3 more so that you can respond at one. Thank you for the show, Bwana moderator. Vote of thanks to Council Sarah. It's time for the civil societies and other well-wishers to put this fire in citizens before the election. You should put the fire, that's what he says. And I'm Nume Agre from Mukono. My question is, if a child gets falls from nursery to P6 and gets you in P7 from nowhere, is that a performing school? Relate that to Kenya Mukuru Jude. Also, you know the truth. And thank you, the NTV on the spot, and all the panelists for the issues of democracy in this country. Surely, even a child can tell, but we haven't learned anything yet. Up to now, we still don't know and defend one man's interests. I wish I had known your name there. I didn't put your name. Okay. My producer is telling me the comments and the questions are so many, so I'm tempted maybe to read just one more, Mr. Producer. Hello, NTV. I'm here, Joseph from Butaleja. My question goes to Dr. Birete. What does she think about the no principle supporting Raila instead of Ruto? Yet, he's always berating the aged politicians in Ugandan government. It's a big one, isn't it? From Butaleja. Okay. Thank you so much. So, Sarah, go for those questions, and also Sarah, go for those questions, and also Councillor Jude Vyamukama. And after you have gone through those questions, we'll be having our concluding arguments.
Yeah, thank you very much. I will start with the question of observers declaring elections free and fair. And the listener quoted the 2021 elections. During the 2021 elections, most of the international observer missions were not accredited, including the US mission to observe elections, where they accredited few of their people, 15, and it could not make sense to deploy 15 people to observe elections in a country and come up with a fair position as to the credibility of the exercise. The EU mission said that all their comments in the previous elections were never implemented, and they did not see value in observing the 2021 elections. We had the observer missions from the region, East African Community, COMESA, IGAD. I don't remember whether AU was here, and then the local civil society observers. I was part of the local civil society observers, and immediately after we issued our first election statement on voting day, Africana, where we issued the press conference from, was sieged, and 28 of our colleagues were arrested, and they were reporting to fabricated charges for 6 months. So somebody was asking, civil society in the country have let Ugandans down, but do they understand the toxic environment, the brutality by the state toward civic actors in this country? You have accredited election observers. And this was after the ban on the Uganda, the National Election Watch, Uganda, knew you, which was interpreted to mean regime change, and then the closure of the big networks that were coordinating election observation, including freezing of accounts of National NGO Forum, freezing of accounts of Uganda Women's Network, and the action, the platform for campaign finance monitoring. What can you achieve in such a toxic environment as civil society observers? Most of the agencies that were not able to come because of COVID, we are relying on local CS observers to observe elections. And most of our colleagues were denied accreditation, and us who were accredited were arrested on voting day for illegal observing elections. So I don't think, and I've stated on several occasions, that I think we need to find a name for what happens in Uganda during the time that we are supposed to have elections, because it does not qualify to be called elections. Okay. You arrest all actors, civil society actors, opposition candidates, disrupt rallies. There is no environment, conducive environment for conducting a credible election in Uganda. Somebody talked about the excessive powers of the president. I know that in our constitution, there are approximately 46 articles that talk about powers of the president. The framers of the constitution have argued on several platforms that they did not envisage a situation of a permanent president when they were making the constitution, because they thought that term limits would work, and then you would have a powerful...
We have a permanent now.
Yeah, we have a permanent president. So you have...
It's the people of the permanent powers to change. Sarah, yeah. It's not the permanent...
No, but we have a permanent president. Since President Museveni captured power in 1986, elections are a mere ceremony. So you have...
That's a big one, you know that.
Yes, I know. But elections are a mere ceremony in this country. They do not qualify. And the Supreme Court on 3 occasions has ruled that the irregularities in our elections do not enable them to meet the constitutional threshold of a free and fair election.
The Americans are fighting with theirs. You saw how they stormed the citadel of democracy, the storming the Capitol January 6th. So even though sometimes we want to learn from them, they are not even any better, even up to date.
Yes. Anyway. I will go in briefly. Somebody commented on NUP principle supporting Raila. I think I did see pictures. I know that Honorable Robert Chagulanyi was part of the observer mission with the South African Foundation, and together with Kizza Besigye and other people. Although we never interacted so much while in Nairobi, but all observers were meeting.
We never saw any NRM people participating in observation, in the observer missions. Did you have any?
I know that the Electoral Commission was represented with the spokesperson of the Commission and the most likely the vice chair.
You think he's an RM?
No. As part of government, I hope they had gone to benchmark on how to attempt.
Our time, unfortunately, is running out.
There was, I think, just something very brief regarding the action of the 4 commissioners of the IEBC. Like I indicated, Article 138 of the Kenyan Constitution clearly gives the power to declare a winner to the chairperson of the IEBC. The only power which is supposed to be shared, according to the Kenyan Constitution, from what we see, is the power to verify results, verify and tally. So we cannot say right now that the declaration, therefore, of the chairperson was void. We can't make that conclusion.
He was within his powers.
It was within his powers, and it's going to be a question of evidence. Can these 4 IEBC commissioners demonstrate that there was no verifying and tallying in accordance with the Constitution? That, I think, is a question of evidence. So we cannot make a judgment either way to say automatically the election is void simply because these 4 commissioners walked away. No. It's a question of evidence, because the job of the IEBC, which is not different from our Electoral Commission, even in terms of mandate, is to verify the results, but the person to declare is the chairperson. If the chairperson is the case, is that for me, I declared what was verified, but my colleagues wanted me to declare something wrong. That's a question of evidence, really, and it's the chairperson's word against the 4. So we cannot make judgment either way without the benefit of what evidence exists for each position.
All right, what's going to be your concluding remarks, Dr. Sarah?
My call is to Ugandans that the failure to have proper democratic processes in this country will not be solved by any single person or by people who are non-Ugandans. Uganda is our country. Article 1 of the Constitution is very clear that power belongs to the people, but it also stipulates how the people shall exercise that power through regular, free and fair, credible elections that we have not been able to witness since the enactment of the 1995 Constitution. My call is that Kenyans have achieved what they have through the effort of majority citizens. Nobody is going to achieve this on your behalf as you enjoy your comfort and calling out people to act. You must act to make your country better.
What's going to be your parting shot?
I think what to me is the most important lesson from what's going on in Kenya is that one, it's actually possible to have an election where we are able to try to follow the results, an election where candidates for either across the political divide can crisscross a country and run their campaigns peacefully without interference. And so we can't give up on Uganda. I prefer to be optimistic. We all have to continue to do our bit to make our country better. Especially my view is we should not discount the idea that even within the ruling party there can be voices of, and there are voices of people who may want things to be run in a better way. So it doesn't have to be a question of, we can only have better elections either when President Museveni is not there or not. I think it's a culture. Having democracy itself is a culture. And it requires people to learn how to tolerate opposing views. It doesn't mean that people who are in the opposition are necessarily the ones who are correct. And similarly, the idea that people who are in NRM or the ruling government is therefore wrong and evil, and we have to be opposed to it all the time, that's not how a democracy works. A democracy involves different actors sharing ideas and views and disagreeing and trying to agree towards the common good of a society. Therefore, it's very important that we do not give up on our country. There are important lessons to pick from Kenya, including that citizens have to continue to work hard to make a better multi-party democracy in this country.
All right. I want to thank you so much, Jude, and I want to thank you so much, Sarah, but most of all, I want to thank you for the privilege of your great company. I know the journey for democracy, we're just beginning. As a country, by the way, we have a great country and we have good people. And the journey for democracy is just beginning. We are taking our baby steps. Of course, we have teething problems. Kenya has given us an example. The Chinese have a saying that a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a step, and the Chinese have taken their step. I mean, the Kenyans have taken their step. So even us, the neighbors in Uganda, we are watching and perhaps we are learning. We have gone through a tumultuous past, but we always pull through. And I think we shall pull through. It may not be today or tomorrow or even 2026, but as a people, we shall make it. Good night, and God bless Uganda.